This is Open to Debate, and I'm your guest moderator, Naima Raza. We are days away from the Super Bowl, and a lot is on the line. I'm not just talking about the Lombardi Trophy or those fancy rings the players get, or even, potentially, Taylor Swift's happiness. I'm talking about tens of billions of dollars that are expected to be wagered on Super Bowl Sunday by tens of millions of Americans. It is, after all, the single most wagered event in our country. Today, we're going to debate the question, has legalizing sports betting become a bad bet? Since a 2018 Supreme Court decision threw out federal legislation that had heavily restricted sports betting, more than $300 billion have been wagered in America. And you know this because we are all inundated with sports betting ads, which themselves have become $1 billion businesses, pulling on stars like Kevin Hart.
Now, I know it's the Super Bowl and all, but everyone gets a free bet?
Vince Vaughn.
BetMGM is for everyone that loves sports betting. Everyone. But Tom Brady.
Wait, what did I do?
Or yes, even Tom Brady. The message here, of course, is that if you bet, you too could win big. But as we know, with the Super Bowl, sports, and betting in general, nobody wins without someone else losing. So did broad legalization pave the way for an economic boom, a predatory industry, or something else altogether? To discuss that, let me introduce our debaters. Arguing that yes, legalizing sports gambling has become a bad bet, we have Harry Levant. Harry is the Director of Gambling Policy with the Public Health Advocacy Institute at Northeastern University. He is a certified gambling therapist and develops public health policies to respond to the rise in online gambling and associated gambling addiction. Harry, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for being here with us.
My pleasure.
And arguing that no, legalizing sports gambling has not become a bad bet, we have Bill Pascrell III. Bill is a lawyer, a gaming lobbyist with the Princeton Public Affairs Group. He has worked for years to try to expand gambling in the United States and was in fact integral to that 2018 Supreme Court case. Bill, welcome.
Nice to be here, Naim. Thank you for having me, and thanks to Open Debate.
Oh, thank you for being here. This is going to be a great conversation because, Bill, you work with many of the companies that profit from sports betting. Harry, I believe your organization is pursuing a class action suit against one of those companies at the moment. DraftKings. So you guys, this should be a good fight. You have a lot to disagree on. But before we start, I thought we should have some critical disclosures, which is, who is everyone's team here? I'm kind of a Lions girl myself, a fair weather fan, I would say.
Go Birds.
Go Birds.
Go
okay.
Birds.
Philadelphia.
Well, when it comes to football, I'm in the deep dark era of my beloved New York Giants.
Sorry,
okay,
Bill.
Great. And are either of you planning to put any money on the Super Bowl this year, Bill?
Listen, we'll get into this. I'm not a huge gambler. I will put, as Harry, God bless him, as he well knows, I do the grids, at the local bar, which is easy money, money in, money out, where there's no rake. But I'm not a big gambler. I like to go to the casino itself, but I'm not a digital gambler at all.
It's interesting. I've yet to meet a gambling industry executive who actually partakes in online gambling. We'll talk about that a little more later. You didn't mention, I am also, among the other hats I wear, I'm a gambling addict in recovery. I made my last bet on April 27th, 2014, survived a suicide attempt related to my gambling addiction that night. I will not be making a bet today. I will not be making a bet on the Super Bowl. I live my recovery proudly one day at a time.
Thank you, Harry, for sharing that.
Of course.
With those caveats and that context in mind, let's get to our opening statements. We want each of you to take a few minutes, precisely, to explain your position. And Harry, you're up first, arguing that yes, legalizing sports gambling has become a bad bet. Please tell us why you think that.
I'd be proud to. Before we respond to that question, however, there's going to be a lot of things today that Bill and I disagree on. But at the start, I want to acknowledge something that brings us together that we do agree on. Back in August of last year, the people of New Jersey lost a dedicated public servant. And more importantly, Bill lost a hero at the death of his father, Congressman Bill Pascrell. And I want to just take a minute and acknowledge, I know what it means to lose your father, Bill. And I just want to take a minute and offer my condolences and the condolences on behalf of my organization, PHAI, to you and your family. Now,
Thank you very much, Harry.
you're quite welcome, Bill. With that said, let's get to the seminal question that brings us here. Has the legalization of sports gambling become a bad bet? The answer to that question is most certainly yes. And the reason the answer to that question is most certainly yes is that in just 6 years since the United States Supreme Court struck down the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, clearing the way for states to legalize sports gambling, in just those 6 years, the gambling industry, working together with its sports and media partners, has delivered to the American people a fundamentally different, inherently dangerous, and defectively and deceptively designed gambling product. A gambling product that is generated almost exclusively by artificial intelligence, that delivers to every phone, tablet, computer, and even TV remote constant and nonstop gambling action on every single micro event within every conceivable sporting event and contest, 24 hours a day, nonstop gambling action. However, we have known for more than 12 years that gambling disorder is an addiction, and gambling is an addictive product, just like heroin and opioids and tobacco and alcohol and cocaine. With every other known addictive product, government regulates the advertising, the distribution, the promotion, and the consumption of the product. And they do that to protect public health. With gambling, the exact opposite is happening. Gambling is being delivered with artificial intelligence at light speed on every device. And the result has become, make no mistake, a public health crisis, the full magnitude and scope of which we are just beginning to recognize. Now, I'm not here today only to warn. I'm here to do much more than that. I'm here today to demonstrate how this has become a public health crisis, why it is happening and why it's a public health crisis, and also offer solutions so that it need not be a public health crisis and it can be made safer. But presently, the gambling industry acts with full impunity. They go from state to state to state, preaching what they call the responsible gaming model, which places the onus on the end user to, as the industry says, just behave responsibly, or as they like to say, have a game plan, overlooking the fact that this is a known addictive product and that in partnership with the sports leagues, teams, players, and owners, in partnership with state government itself, the product is being delivered in a business model that requires nonstop action, rapid consumption, and almost near total use. That model must inexorably cause more addiction and more gambling-related harm. We have a public health crisis, and it's for Congress now to do something about it.
Thank you, Harry. Bill, I think there'll be a lot you disagree with in that opening statement. You believe legalizing sports gambling has not become a bad bet. You have 4 minutes now to make your opening argument.
Harry, thank you very much. You certainly know how to debate because you soften me up. I'm wearing my dad's pin, which he gave to me on his deathbed, his congressional pin. I just wear it in honor of him. So thank you very much for your kind words. My dad was my best friend, in addition to being my hero. So I think it's important at the outset to set some context. Yes, I was the quarterback of the repeal of PASPA, the 10-year campaign, states' rights, Commerce Clause, that the Supreme Court ruled on May 14th, 2018. I was at the Supreme Court with Ted Olson, Governor Murphy, Senate President Sweeney, and the rest of us that were involved in the public affairs, the lobbying, and the legal litigation that was involved in this 10-year campaign to repeal PASPA. Sports betting's been going on legally in Nevada for decades. It's only been going on for the rest of the country that has it, 39 states, plus the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico. And Missouri will be launching probably in Q2 because they passed the ballot referendum last year. So a majority of the country now has legalized sports betting. I just did a debate at Faulkner University late last year, invited by the governor of Alabama and the president of Faulkner to debate the morality of gambling. I love these kinds of debates. And the reason I love it is not only is Harry a worthy, call it adversary, I don't really like to use that term, but he's deeply committed to his belief. And I don't suspect that Harry is going to change his mind because of what I'm going to say, but I am also equally committed to my position. And that position is, I believe, now I'm on the National Council of Problem Gambling's Federal Affairs Board. I represent organizations from IC360 to Epic to Kindbridge and working with all kinds of organizations to try to put forward the proposition that it's on the industry and the regulatory regime to do better. There's no bulletproof solution that's going to solve problem gambling. But where Harry and I separate is between 96 and 99% of all gamblers in all markets, not just in the US, don't have a problem with gambling. They use it as entertainment, as fun. Put a bet on a game, you're going to be more inclined to watch the game and kibitz and joke. And that's all safe and fine. The problem is that one, perhaps 2%, that have the problem using gambling as a coping mechanism. I want to salute Harry for being 8.5 years, bumping up on 9 years as a recovered gambler, gambling addict. That's a huge accomplishment. But what I also want to say is this is not a public health crisis. There's no empirical data that shows that. And more calls to 1-800 numbers, the 1-800 problem gambler numbers, does not mean there's more problems. A good chunk of those calls, data will show, are people who are having technical problems with the app. I believe legalized regulated gambling is the best way to address gambling addiction. It's not addressed through the black market, which is double, maybe triple the size of the regulated market.
Thank you, Bill. Harry, you outlined what you called an industry that is different, more dangerous, deceptive, and highly more digitized than had been anticipated when the Supreme Court pushed out PASPA in 2018. You likened it to addictive product, to a 24/7 fire hose of gambling options that is, in your view, generating a public health crisis. And Bill, just to summarize your argument for people who just joined, you're saying it's not a public health crisis, that for the vast majority of people who gamble, this is a form of entertainment, of fun, and that we should not be designing for, the small percentage of people in your estimation that have this, or in data that you're reviewing, that have a problem with gambling, that there's ways to design the system in a way that allows for there to be fun and not doesn't prove that legalization has been a crisis in and of itself. You talked about problem gambling as a minority of cases versus the public health crisis that Harry's kind of laying out. So I guess maybe to start, I ask you, Bill, to respond to this idea, because I think when Harry talks about public health crisis, he talks about addictive industry, and I've heard him make previously an analogy to big tobacco here, that there is a big industry, huge profitable industry that knows about the dangers, is doing very little about them. How do you respond to that kind of metaphor?
It's pretty straightforward. Every smoker is jeopardizing their health. There's no responsible way to smoke. Smoking in and of itself is innately harmful. Gambling is not. We've been gambling since almost the beginning of mankind, back in the Greek and Roman empires, on everything. And who hasn't said, hey, I'll bet you this guy doesn't do this or this gal doesn't do that. The thing I want to make very abundantly clear, Dr. Levant is committed to his position, and I agree that we have to make sure that the industry is protecting consumers and putting mechanisms in place to help gambling addicts. You do not help gambling addicts by banning gambling, or, I know that's not Harry's position, I don't believe, or by banning advertising. We've gone through that. There's a professor at Fordham University who I work with. He hasn't given me the privilege of putting his name out there, so I won't. Fordham is my dad's alma mater. That will tell you that there's a strict First Amendment right that will never allow Congressman Tonko and Blumenthal, Senator Blumenthal's original bill, to proceed on banning advertising. Now, I know Harry is close with the senator and the congressman, and they're good friends, and I love them. And I've met with Congressman Tonko, actually debated him, Harry, at Saratoga a year and a half ago at the Gaming and Racing Summit at the track. He was kind enough to come. He, like Harry, is committed to mental health. My dad was the chairman of the brain injury caucus in Congress. So I'm sensitive to protecting individuals that have mental health issues. But what I am not supportive of is trying to ban things. And the reason I'm not supportive of that, not just because I put my blood, sweat, and tears into this 10-year case to repeal PASPA, but because I truly believe the problem is the black market. We don't know how many people in the black market are going down the rat hole that the 1 to 2% of all gamblers go down who become addictive. We know what the problem is, but it's all about the solutions.
There's so many things that need to be addressed here, beginning with truth for the audience about numbers. And let me take one that's an easy one that I know Bill just misspoke on. I thank you for the kind words, but I'm actually coming up on 11 years since my last bet, not 8 years. Secondly, the statistics that Bill has been quoting are 1980s statistics about only 1% of people are addicted to gambling. And just to be clear, we are not going to use the word problem gamblers. The problem is not with the individual. The problem is with the addictive nature of the product. So let's put some science, facts, and hard numbers in front of our audience. Scientific fact. In 2013, the American Psychiatric Association recognized that gambling is an addictive product and gambling disorder is an addiction categorized on the same level as heroin, opioids, tobacco, alcohol, and cocaine. In 2017, the World Health Organization made the exact same recognition in the International Classification of Diseases, and the World Health Organization has called for gambling to be treated as an international issue of public health. Sadly, within the last year, the president of the American Gaming Association, Bill Miller, went on national television on a show that I was on with him and told the American public that the gaming industry doesn't believe that gambling is an addictive product. The science is the science. Next, the numbers Bill quotes, we know are wrong. We know they are wrong in a few ways. First, the extraordinary increase in calls for help as each state comes online with legalized sports gambling. Next, unlike every other addictive product, there is absolutely no screening for gambling disorder in this country. When you go to your doctor, they will ask you, do you smoke? How much? Do you drink? How often? What drugs do you take? The only people who get counted with struggling with gambling disorder are people who crawl in for help. We have no idea how many people are suffering. The industry has no idea. It's only the industry that says 1%. Lastly, the industry never counts, ever, the impacted others. That is, if a person is struggling with gambling, what about their spouse, their children, their coworkers, their community? We have a widespread and burgeoning public health crisis that has been recognized in countries that have had legalized online gambling longer. Australia, Finland, Spain, the UK, all look at this as an issue of public health. The industry in America wants to put the onus on the individual. We'll talk in a few minutes, I hope, about the fundamentally different nature of gambling. But let's make it very clear. I have a casino in my hand right now. This is not what anyone expected when Bill and his colleagues artfully argued in the Supreme Court for PASPA to be struck. That was great lawyering, Bill. But what it has resulted in is something fundamentally different that the industry makes every effort to not talk about. And I am here today in part to bring the industry into 2025. And let's have a real conversation about what people are actually experiencing. Because there is data. There's data that's just come out of California. There's data from qualified researchers who are showing significant problems as each state legalizes.
So, Bill, I mean, Harry's talking about the internalization of the costs to the individuals that are suffering and the, rapid change of technology in this process since 2018. And certainly the numbers have come up. 3 times the number of people are betting on the Super Bowl now than in 2019. 4 times as much money is being placed on those bets, or many families affected. How do you respond to that? Are there unforeseen consequences that you didn't anticipate in 2018?
No, absolutely not.
Oh.
First of all, I saw Harry and Bill Miller on 60 Minutes, and Harry did a wonderful job, as he always does. But we're going to part ways on this. The industry has done significant work, massive work. I'll give you some examples. The Rutgers research, the UNLV research is paid for by the industry.
That's the problem.
Not anyone else.
That's the problem.
No, it's not.
This is exactly what Big Tobacco
Harry,
did. Big Tobacco did this bill for decades. They pay and control the research.
Yeah. But
Tell the people the truth.
Let me make my point.
Can we jump into that point? Because I think there is an argument, and I want, Bill, you to respond to the remainder, but I do think there's an argument that I heard Harry make about this kind of everyone's in on it. There's, and I will just say, in actually setting up this debate, our producers had a hard time finding someone to take the complete opposite position of a ban, in part because, athletes, industry, regulators benefit from the change in the law.
It's why I did the debate in Faulkner. It's why I'm doing this, the debate. It's why I'm doing a debate in Barcelona, because I believe in what I'm saying, and I'm not hiding under the covers. This industry has a great story to tell. The problem, Harry's right, is the industry. They don't tell their story.
They don't tell the truth.
Harry, come on.
They don't.
Hundreds of thousands of jobs.
Bill, how many?
Harry, let's let Bill finish his statement.
First of all, the Rutgers University study, the UNLV study, which is continuing, and there's a 5-year study paid for by a client of mine at Harvard. You're going to question the credibility of those academic institutions? I don't think so. I think those are good studies paid for by who should pay for them? The industry. The issue here, I want to respond to this. I've met with multiple problem gambling organizations. An organization that Harry knows, like Oasis. I was encouraged by the governor of New York to meet with them. Senator Adabo, Assemblyman Pretlow, the chairs of the 2 gaming committees in New York. I met with Oasis. With my client Entain, the largest publicly traded online gaming company in the globe, based in London, who's a 50-50 partner with MGM to make the organization BetMGM. They're spending $10 million, and maybe somebody would call it peanuts, to advocate for responsible gaming. They have technology out of Israel called ARC. There's many, many systems. One of the best ways we can put some solutions on gambling addiction and problem gambling is to have a national self-exclusion list. The self-exclusion lists in each state are a waste of time. I have a family member who on their own, who happens to be in the gambling industry and is an attorney, put himself on the self-exclusion list and then realized when he wanted to get back into the game, all he had to do was cross the pond and go over to New York, or cross the bridge and go over to Pennsylvania. There should be a national self-exclusion list, and I would challenge Harry to join me in trying to develop that. And it's utter garbage that the data protection laws preclude that. That's baloney. I think the industry has a responsibility to use the self-exclusion list and to share that data across state lines in a legal way. And final point, there is zero empirical data. Harry talked about an anecdote The fact that there's more calls to the 1-800 number does not mean there's more gambling addiction. And Oasis told us that a lot of those calls, up to 40% of those calls, are people who have problems with the technology, not with gambling addiction. Now, we have to focus on the 60% who call in who have a problem. Challenged individuals, veterans, minorities, and others who are more vulnerable to the addictive nature of problem gambling.
The addictive nature is the addictive nature of the product. Let's find one here that we can agree on. As Bill knows, I was privileged to help write the Safe Bet Act. One of the things I wrote into that act is a national self-exclusion list. So hopefully Bill and his industry partners will join in supporting federal legislation designed to prevent harm. I don't think Bill meant to paint me in any way as a prohibitionist. I'm not seeking a ban on anything. I'm seeking public health protection at the federal level. Because
well, you called for a ban on advertising.
I have not called for a ban. I've called for restrictions on advertising, just like we have restrictions on other things on TV. I've called for reasonable times. I have never called for a ban on advertising. The Safe Bet Act doesn't ban advertising. It restricts the hours. And you know why it does that, Bill? Because when I was watching the pregame show for the World Series, you and I share some things in common. We're both big sports fans. I know we both watch the World Series, and I know we both know that the World Series and sports in general have always been part of the American culture and the American fabric. The pre-game show in the World Series is sponsored by a gambling company. It is filled with gambling ads. It is filled with talks of overs and unders. You can't sit down and watch a sporting event with your 9-year-old child without being inundated with gambling ads. And perhaps worse still, when you think about sports being part of the American fabric, it's time to tell the listeners and viewers of this broadcast, which is an important broadcast because it gives us an opportunity to take two sides and expose the truth. What has happened here since 2018 is a partnership between the gambling industry, sports, and media. I promised folks in my opening statement that I would tell them how this has happened.
So I want to let you get there, Harry, but I want to just take a moment. I mean, the difference that you guys really have is on how much regulation and who should lead, who should be at the head of that. And I mean, I hear Bill making an argument that the industry is doing a good job self-regulating.
And I'm trying to respond to that with due respect. Yeah. I'm trying to respond to just that because what was just told in the words responsible gaming, Bill didn't mention the independent study from researchers from UC Berkeley and UCLA that it came out within the last 3 months that shows in each state that legalizes sports gambling, the rates of bankruptcy filings, the rates of mortgage foreclosures, the rates of divorce are increasing exponentially. That's happening state by state by state. So and the question becomes why. The reason it's happening is because we're no longer talking about just gambling. Sports have been turned into the equivalent of a non-stop slot machine. The action never, ever, ever stops. Yet the industry tries to say, we can regulate ourselves. What we've seen in just 6 years is this industry is incapable of regulating itself.
Okay, I'm going to cut you off there, Harry, and ask Bill to respond to that. Bill, basically, why do you think the industry is a better regulator, or is it effective or efficient regulator to the extent that you do? And two, what would be the harm, in your view, of more regulation around things like advertising, around things like the timings?
First of all,
yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I'm sorry. I am not in support of banning things, and I like the fact that Harry is in agreement with that. Number two, I have no problem with better regulations, more regulations. And I will tell you, the toughest jurisdiction in the country on responsible gaming initiatives and controls is the state of New Jersey. I challenge Harry to call the New Jersey Division of Gaming and ask them where the bulk of those responsible gaming standards came from. It came from them reaching out to the industry and a lot of work by Martin Litchkin and I, the head of regulatory affairs from Maintain, and myself. And we've met with every regulatory regime in the country. Every state that has legalized sports betting, either digitally or retail in person, has responsible gaming initiatives. Some are better than others. There's no bulletproof solution. This is an evolution. And number two, they review every ad. So maybe they want to discuss further advertising restrictions, right? You don't have children in gambling ads. You have to be careful what you say in gambling ads, but there is monitoring of that. And a third thing, even though my dad was a 28-year member of Congress, and I used to be the chief of staff to a congressman and worked for many people on the Hill in my life, the federal government can't run a one-car funeral. I don't want them involved in the gambling industry. The states can do it and are doing it. And yes, we do need further controls. I agree with that.
State regulation has been an abysmal failure, and what the Safe Bet Act is designed to do is to set minimum federal standards. And what we need to do is talk about why that is so important. And the people listening to this need to understand what these words responsible gaming really mean. Responsible gaming is industry language for let us self-regulate. Put the onus on the individual to ask for help, and then we'll pay for their treatment. It's the moral equivalent of big tobacco saying, let us do whatever we want with our product as long as we pay for chemotherapy and hospice on the back end. We wouldn't tolerate it. We wouldn't tolerate it with tobacco. We overcame it with alcohol. We now need to deal with it with gambling. And I'll give you a very specific reason.
I want to, this idea, this conversation around a federal standard versus state and industry-led regulation, which Bill's advocating for, the federal, safety net that Harry is putting forward, is a key difference of yours. It's also something that's very timely right now as we think about things like Doge, et cetera, in the public conversation, what the federal government can do. There's also, I do want to get to this question of technology, because there is a rapid shift happening in technology as well with crypto, with AI.
The Safe Bet Act addresses all of this. The Safe Bet Act puts in deposit limits, affordability checks, and regulates the use of artificial intelligence so that gambling companies can no longer target individuals with AI-driven gambling products. If we're going to dig into this debate and understand why this is a public health crisis, we need to talk about what online sports gambling in America has become. For example, I can reach into my pocket right now. I don't have an account, Bill, but I can go into your company's site, BetMGM. I can take my phone out of my pocket, and with 2 clicks of my thumb, in fact, I just did it, I am inside a sports book. A 9-year-old can do that. There is absolutely no justification.
No, they can't.
Yes, they can. I just did it.
Well, I was involved with Tonko in the predecessor to the Safe Bet Act, which was a disastrous bill. It did ban marketing, all advertising on gambling. They've now learned, and Tonko's a great guy. We have been working with Congressman Tonko, and will continue to work with him and Blumenthal to make what they're trying to do impactful, right? Banning marketing and advertising was in his original bill.
It's not in the Safe Bet
Act because they realized that bill is probably not going anywhere anytime soon because Blumenthal and Tonko have not been able to get a majority member in either house on it.
Bill, will the industry join a call for affordability checks so that people don't get hurt?
Okay, I want to respond to each of your points. Affordability checks, I am 1,000% against. They have them in Denmark and in many jurisdictions in Europe. The reason they, don't work is if I have $100 affordability check, I just go into the black market, Harry, and you know this. Bovado, Bodog, 5 Dimes. There's dozens of black market industries that have no RG checks, 0, okay? And they don't have licensing, taxes, compliance costs that the regulated market has. So I don't like casting aspersions and a broad brush on the industry. The other point is when you have affordability checks, or caps on what you can bet, it just drives people to the black market. It doesn't solve any problem.
Bill, I've been hearing
education is the key.
Bill,
and by the way, you know this, anyone who signs up for an account is age verified, KYC, know your customer.
Yeah, to make a bet. But you can get inside the sports book. I'll tell you right now what I can bet on with 2 clicks of my thumb. Why does MGM do that? Why does MGM permit children to look at the sports book?
They don't permit children to look at the sports book. If somebody picks up their mother's or father's phone, they could do a lot of bad things with that. That's on the parent's side.
Bill, I have
That's
a phone
the
in my hand.
parent's responsibility.
I just want to jump in and say, that argument, of course, there are legal restrictions on in age gating and verification.
There are, but I'm inside a sports book right now as any child. The problem with what the industry is doing, they are normalizing an addictive product.
So let's talk about that for a moment. This idea, you both are sports fans. You love the sport. You love watching the sport. And I'm so curious, in this great American playing field of sports and fairness and like the love of the play, each of you, what do you think that gambling has done to the purity of the sports?
It has destroyed. Sports no longer belong to the American public, the American family. Sports belong and have sold themselves to the gambling industry. And I told the audience at the start, I would explain how and why this has happened. We're no longer talking about just betting on whether the Eagles or the Rams are going to win on Sunday. What has happened is the industry in 6 years has developed a product called micro betting. Micro betting is the most addictive form and the most dangerous form of gambling because it allows users to bet on every single micro event within a game. For example, will the next running play be more or less than 4.5 yards? And what the sports leagues are doing with their gambling partners is for billions and billions of dollars, they are selling their statistics to the gambling industry. The gambling industry then, in order to make a profit, and these are companies that are in business to make a profit, has to turn these statistics into faster and quicker and more lethal micro bets. That is what is causing an unbelievable amount of harm while the industry says, oh, wait a minute, it's only 1% of people.
So I want Bill to respond. I want Bill to respond to my question of, Bill, do you have an argument here that this is somehow deepening, making sports more enjoyable, exciting? Do you see it differently as a sports fan, as someone who loves the game?
Well, I totally disagree with Harry's position that it's had an negative impact on sports. Now, in the 10-year campaign to repeal PASPA, I have the scars on my back to prove it. The NFL, the NBA, the NHL, PGA, NCAA, we're all against the repeal of PASPA. They're the big hypocrites. I don't represent them, nor do I want to. They're the hypocrites because, yes, Harry's right. They have gained financially because of this, but they contradicted themselves in the papers to the courts, from the Federal District Court in New Jersey to the Third Circuit Court to the Supreme Court. They were arguing, they were concerned about the integrity of the game. When you walked into a sports book in Nevada prior to PASPA's repeal, on a football Sunday, the top of the ticket had the NFL logo. They were already getting action. So my point is, where Harry's wrong, we now know more than we ever did to ensure the integrity of the game. We have massive data. We're putting that data out there. And companies like IC360, which is an integrity company with massive data, also have a tool called Prohibit. How do you prevent a college player from gambling? Because it's forbidden. The NCAA rules and the conference rules forbid players from gambling. Who monitors that? Prohibit has the whole database that can be utilized by the leagues to ensure that that doesn't happen.
Have American taxpayers, has the public captured enough of this value that's been generated from this huge industry that's being captured by, as you're saying, the sports leagues and the companies that, Prohibit, et cetera, all these startups in the space? Tax revenue here is a small dent by the data, I think. Is there enough capture happening from the public sector and from taxpayers?
There's no, I will not respond to the word revenue for this reason. All of the money in this infrastructure, and this is what Bill won't talk about, All of these players, Bill brought up the hypocrisy of the sports leagues, who immediately turned around and sold their statistics for enormous amounts of money that the gambling industry pays. And then the gambling industry, to get that money back, they're not selling any products in the marketplace. The only way they recover the money they're paying to their partners in the leagues is to get people to gamble more quickly. So for example, in a baseball game, you can bet on the speed of every pitch. So when you talk about revenue, what we're talking about are public losses. Every dollar in this space comes from only one place. The amount of money the citizens of each state are losing. So what we need to talk about in the next segment is the harm that is causing.
I'm going to let Bill respond and have the last word here. Bill, do you think that, do you think there's been a benefit to the public you're saying it's taken this dark money industry, this black market industry, and put it online. Do you think there's been a benefit to legalization in terms of taxation and other benefits?
Absolutely. There's over 300,000 jobs created just since the inception of the repeal of PASPA directly in the industry. That's not multipliers. Number two, tens of billions of dollars in tax revenue that states desperately need, plus the federal excise tax. Second point, where we should be putting resources is in better technology. There's no bulletproof solution for problem gambling or gambling addiction. I am working with a company not too far from where this studio is that moved from San Francisco called Birch's Health. You know what it is? It's a fully insured, operators, regulators, customers don't have to pay for it, fully insured treatment for gambling addicts. We're talking about 1%, maybe Harry would say 2%, right? It's not grown because of legalization. The third point is we should put more resources into penetrating the black market. There's been an abysmal failure in penetrating the black market. We need to focus on that because nobody knows what's going on there.
We're going to bring in some other voices now, members of the audience who have been listening to this conversation and want to help us push it further. First, I'd like to welcome Rachel Volberg. She's a research professor in epidemiology at UMass Amherst, and she's been studying and looking at gambling since 1985, with her recent work examining whether problem gambling has been on the rise in Massachusetts in the past few years. Rachel, welcome. What question do you have for our debaters today?
Thank you, Naima. It's been a very interesting exchange of views. The question that I have for both of the debaters is, what is the single most important measure that you believe is needed to maximize the benefits and minimize the harms of legalized sports betting?
Rachel, thank you for your question. Thank you for your service, and thank you for what you do. I think this is where Harry and I can find alignment. I think a national self-exclusion list is one of the most important things we can do. And I would say a subpart to that, maybe plan B, offering B, solution B, because I'm about solutions. We all know what the problem is. We could debate the magnitude of the problem. Again, I don't think it's a public health crisis. It hasn't reached that level, but I do think we need to focus on that black market industry. And we also need to focus on better innovation tools to crack down on people who fall off the grid, to have them time out, to have them pause, and potentially to have them restricted. One thing I've always said is the RG issue, responsible gaming, problem gambling, is the seminal issue for the industry. And the only way to create a more sustainable industry is for the industry to do more, and they're doing that through technology. You can use AI for many harmful things. And Harry's right. Some operators are using AI to be able to penetrate more. I also think we could talk about using AI to help with the 1% of gamblers who go down the rat hole.
Bill, I didn't go down a rat hole. I'm a person in recovery from gambling addiction, and in support of everyone who struggles with gambling addiction, I want to take umbrage with the use of the word rat hole. First of all, Rachel, I want to acknowledge and thank you for your years of service in this space. You have been looking at these issues for many, many years. And your work, frankly, is some of the first that I discovered when I went back to school to become a therapist in my gambling addiction recovery. And I think it's the first we've met, and it's a pleasure to meet you today. I'm going to respond directly to your question, and in so doing, I'm also going to pose an opportunity to Bill as well. Rachel, your work was part of the original inception of the responsible gaming model. And with all due respect to the responsible gaming model and the work that you and your colleagues put into its creation, it is 1980s technology to a 1980s response to a 2025 problem. The single biggest thing, to answer your question directly, we have to move from the responsible gaming model, which puts the onus on the individual, to a regulatory model based on a public health approach. Here's the difference. The responsible gaming model pulls people out of the river after they're drowning. Bill, in fact, just said so. He's for a national exclusion list. We didn't mention yet today that I also wear a hat. I'm a certified gambling addiction therapist. The clients who come in to see me are hemorrhaging. By the time you go on a self-exclusion list, the harm has already happened to you, your family members, your friends, your children. The idea on a public health approach is not to ban gambling, but to make it as safe as possible, Rachel, by going back to the top and changing the paradigm. The paradigm shift is we're going to regulate the nature and distribution of the addictive product so that harm doesn't happen in the first place. And Bill, here's my proposal to you. You're absolutely correct. You and I disagree on the magnitude of the harm. I'm calling it a public health crisis. You say it's just 1%. Here's my proposal to you. If research and scientific evidence continues to develop to show that this is a much bigger problem beyond 1%, and that it's impacting families and children and communities at a much larger percentage than the industry is currently saying, being only 1%, if that were to be shown, would you then join me in a call for public health reform at the federal level?
I am telling you right now, there is no empirical data from academia that proves that this is a mental health crisis beyond the one, I could even argue 2%. What we have to keep in mind is what Harry is proposing is penetrating legal operators who are trying to be responsible. And by the way, they are not making oodles of money. The margins in sports betting are thin. On the other side of the digital aisle, with casino and poker, the margins are bigger. I want to put those dollars into education. I think it is reprehensible that any academic institution doesn't allow for a discussion in the classroom on the problems of gambling and how to better sort yourself to avoid becoming addicted. And I didn't mean to cast aspersions on you, Harry, but I've referred to the rat hole many times, and many problem gamblers like Paul Buck have embraced that.
Sorry, Bill.
So I wasn't
Thank you. It sounds like, Bill, you're
you.
not going to be joining Harry in the proposal because you don't accept the kind of
the premise.
hypothetical. Hypothetical. Okay, so I want to make sure that we have time for other expert questioners. Thank you so much, Rachel, for asking that question about a single lever to make a difference here. I want to bring in Charles Fain Lehman next. Charles is a fellow at the Manhattan Institute and a contributing editor of the City Journal. He also wrote an excellent piece that I very much enjoyed reading about sports betting for The Atlantic, titled "Legalizing Sports Gambling Was a Huge Mistake," effectively taking the ban side of this argument. Charles, please come in with your question.
Sure. Thanks for having me on the show. I want to ask just a little bit about the research, which is where this conversation ought to be grounded. There's a recent study from the folks at Southern Methodist. They use a panel of 700,000 gamblers, and by their estimates, Bill's figures are approximately right. Something like 3 to 5% of the folks in the panel are problem gamblers as measured by the fraction of what they spend on gambling. On the other hand, by their same estimates, those 3% account for half of the revenue generated by the panel. And that's a common feature in industries and addictive goods, which is that most of the money for these industries comes from the small fraction who are addicted. So with those facts in mind, I guess my question is for Bill, which is why should we trust the industry to self-regulate when, as is true in many other addictive industries, their incentives are to enable and reward addictive behavior?
Yeah. A couple of things, Charles. Thank you for the question. I had a conversation with a regulator 5 years ago. I was trying to get the head of RG for a major company to become a key license holder. And they said, Bill, that's a joke. And I said, why? Because nobody in any organization takes the RG lead seriously, right? You go into the boardroom and the RevPsych people laugh at the RG person because the RG person is bumping up against their bonus propositions. I don't think that's great. One of my objectives is to try to get more RG leads to become key license holders, which every book has to have, number one. Number two, I believe in academic-based research. When the academic-based research shows that there really is, in fact, a growing problem due to legalized, regulated gambling, I am more than happy to embrace. Second point, you asked about the trust. You don't trust anybody. I wanted to ask you to trust me. Trust but verify. I think there are actors in the industry that are doing a good job. I think others are just checking a box. Oh, we have to put a 1-800 number up on the screen, or we have to have a self-exclusion list. Check the box, and they don't really care, right? That's pervasive in any channel, in any industry. What we need to do is better educate consumers, athletes, right? And that money needs to come from the industry in a responsible way. And second point, we also need better collaboration between regulators and operators to come up with real solutions, not prohibitions, not bans, but solutions. Final point, I do not agree, Charlie, with anybody who argues that gambling is inherently dangerous. Just like any other vice, obviously it can become dangerous when it's not handled responsibly.
Thank you, Charles, for that question. And thank you, Bill, for answering it. Our final questioner here is Daniel Wallach. Daniel is a lawyer with expertise in gaming and gambling. He was a co-founder of the Sports Wagering Integrity Program at University of New Hampshire, and he also teaches law at the University of Miami. Daniel, come in with your question.
Bill, you hit the nail on the head earlier a little bit when you talked about the black market and the eradication of the black market. Even though we're 7 years into the Supreme Court decision that allows states to regulate sports betting, the vast majority of wagering is still happening through unregulated and illegal channels. I think the American Gaming Association has estimated that $550 billion annually is being wagered through these unregulated channels, and we're being inundated with them. We can actually put a name to the black market. We see the sweepstakes sports books, and I don't want to start naming names, but it is an enormous market that overshadows the amount of regulated sports betting that is taking place. So it's costing states roughly according to the American Gaming Association, over $13 billion of lost tax revenues that could be funding the kinds of programs that you advocate for. How can you rationalize as a public health professional, and I'm speaking to Mr. Levant and directing this question to him, how can you rationalize a position where you're trying to punish and harm the people that are playing by the rules, but not advocating for more specific and meaningful enforcement efforts against illegal operators? I admit that everybody can do better here, but the illegal market still casts a giant shadow over the industry and is actually predatory towards consumers. What can be done? What more can be done to put more of the focus towards that?
I appreciate the 3-4 minute preamble quoting the American Gaming Association. I'm going to respond to I wasn't sure whether I was hearing from you or from Bill with that. I'm going to respond to it, but in so doing, I am not accepting the boogeyman argument that the American Gaming Association has been making for a very long time, which is sort of a predicate to your question. I offered Bill an opportunity to join with me in calling for public health regulation if the evidence continues to show that the mental health crisis is in fact growing. Bill didn't want to respond to that. I'm going to go the opposite way. I will work with the American Gaming Association. I will work with Bill. I will work with Congress to fight the black market. None of us are in favor of a black market. But your question leaves the incorrect impression, because what's causing the harm is micro betting in this country. Micro betting exists because of the partnerships between the leagues, the gambling industry, the media, the tech companies, delivering gambling at light speed on every single event within a sporting game. The patients I treat every day are getting crushed by micro betting. Micro betting does not take place in the black market because we do not permit our sports leagues to sell their data in real time to the black market boogeyman. So let's have a real honest conversation about what the legalized, commercialized gambling industry in America has created in the last 6 years. Let's talk about why that product is so dangerous, and let's talk about the need, going back to Rachel's question, for a federal response to that. Because we can all work together, including the sports league partners, to shut out black market. Are we ever going to shut it all out? Probably not. Welcome to the internet world. But DraftKings just purchased an AI company called SimpleBet for the stated purpose of delivering micro betting faster and faster and faster to their gamblers. This is inherently dangerous. The American Gaming Association is silent about it, and it is something we could all do something with right now. And it's what the Safe Bet Act does. So the Safe Bet Act and dealing with the black market are not mutually exclusive. I look forward to working with Bill and anyone else who wants to try and shut off black market sites. At the same time, the time has come for the gambling industry to recognize that given the magnitude of this, we cannot go state by state by state by state by state. It's impossible. There need to be certain federal minimum standards. And that's what the Safe Bet Act is about. The Safe Bet Act will protect
Thank
the
you very
public.
much, Harry. So thank you very much, Daniel, for that question. Appreciate it. This has been a heated conversation. I am curious, you guys obviously have debated this topic, today for an hour. You come across each other in the industry. What do you find most persuasive or compelling about each other? What keeps you coming back and talking to each other?
He's a nice guy. He's a good person. He's an informed person. I may have mentioned this earlier. Look, my story, I'm very open with my story. I'm a former lawyer. I'm a disbarred lawyer. I gambled client money and take full accountability for it. I hurt a lot of people in my gambling addiction. But I also recognize good lawyering. The work that Bill did in having PASPA overturned is very, very fine lawyering that should be taught to students in law schools. It's an excellent example of 10th Amendment principles. Bill knows what he's talking about. He's also fundamentally wrong about this not being a public health crisis. And one thing I'm certain of, I'm unaware of any issue that can't be improved if we talk about it. So why do and you use the word heated. I think there were intense, but I don't think there was anything heated or disagreeable. We disagree, and given more time, we can dive more deeply into it. And I suspect we will in other places again, because one thing we both know, this needs to be made safer. Our solutions are a little bit different, but this thing is being treated like it's the wild, wild west right now, and to just say it's a de minimis problem is wrong. So I welcome opportunities to get together with Bill. I predict, I don't bet, but I predict we will be doing so more often on a more regular basis, and it will remain informed and intense, but never disagreeable.
Thank you very much for that, Harry. Bill?
Can I?
Yes, please. I'd invite you to respond as well. Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, I was extremely thrilled when Open Bet reached out to me. Open Debate, pardon me.
Open to Debate, yes.
Open to Debate reached out to me and told me who I would be debating. I truly believe that there needs to be more people in the world like Harry because, okay, he has a lived experience and he's really committed to this. There are many on his side of the issue and on mine who are lackluster, don't believe in what they're saying, not committed, not enthusiastic. I hope Harry and I can continue the discussion. I love his commitment. I know he's true, and I know he's a man of integrity. But the problem with the industry also is there needs to be more conversation like this. I know that Bill Miller was kind of thrown under the bus on 60 Minutes because nobody else would do it. I know that my partners thought I was thrown under the bus when I went to Faulkner. I relish the debate. It's a civil debate. It's a respectful debate. And Harry, thanks for the opportunity to be with you today.
Right. See, thanks, guys. I was wrong. It wasn't heated. There was actually a veritable love fest of disagreement. Thank you both. So now it is the time to bring it home with closing remarks. Harry, you're going to have the first opportunity to make your remarks. Give us one last reason why you believe legalizing sports gambling has become a bad bet.
Because what has been launched on the American public over the last 6 years is an out-of-control, wild, wild west environment where all of the money in this space, and we've talked about a lot of different parties and players, from gambling companies to the sports leagues, the teams, the players, the media, the advertisers, all of the things you see in social media, people giving out gambling tips, all of the money that is driving this engine is coming from one place and one place only. And that is losses by the public. And when Bill was fighting to overturn PASPA, and PASPA was overturned in 2018, no one, not even Bill, could have foreseen that just 6 years later, people would be able to gamble on their phones without getting out of bed. I frankly have patients I treat who gamble in the shower. This product has invaded every aspect of American life because it is inexorably tied to sports. Sports historically belong to families. Sports belong to communities. Sports brought out the best of us in competition and camaraderie. Sports are now a nonstop spinning slot machine. Every single event is gambling, and that is something that the human brain can't handle at that pace. And to be very clear for everyone, it's not a debate between Bill and myself whether gambling is an addictive product. Every accrediting medical agency in the world recognizes that gambling disorder is an addiction and gambling is a known addictive product, just like heroin and opioids. Every other addictive product, government regulates its distribution. Gambling, it's the Wild West, and it's now time to do something about it.
Thank you very much, Harry. Now, Bill, you're going to have the last word here. Convince us again why legalizing sports gambling has not become a bad bet.
Yeah. First of all, I think the majority of the people who participate in the legal regulated market use it for entertainment value. I am concerned about those who creep into and fully get into an addictive problem gambling behavior. I believe that sports wagering being accused as the root cause of a pseudo national health crisis is simply not the case. I also believe that the best way to address this issue is through education, further technology, which everybody's looking into, and to also let the facts speak for themselves. There is no empirical data that shows that there's been an explosion, as many have said, not Harry, in gambling addiction. We know that there's going to be 1 to 2% of the population, no matter whether you have legalized gambling or not, that are going to have a problem, okay? We've talked about some solutions. Education is key. Awareness is key. collaborative working together between the industry and regulators. It doesn't always come out the right way that the industry would want, but the industry needs to be even further engaged. I truly believe that there's been a wonderful experience. I am concerned about consumer protection and for those who've fallen off the cliff and have had a problem with it. But that shouldn't be an impetus to cast aspersions on an industry that's created jobs, is compliant, is legal, lawful, and in regulatory shape. There's no bulletproof solution. We need to keep trying to achieve better outcomes.
Thanks, Bill. And that concludes our debate. I'd like to thank our debaters, Harry Levant and Bill Pascrell III. We so appreciate you showing up. You're approaching this debate with an open mind and you're bringing your thoughtful disagreement to the table. So much of what we try to do here at Open to Debate is have these kinds of insightful and intense conversations and civil discourse and continue to have them. So I really appreciate Bill and Harry, your willingness to do that. You're talking about your willingness to do that and for exemplifying that, your openness to debate. Thank you for being here. I'd also like to thank the questioners who joined me here today, Rachel, Charles, and Daniel. Thank you so much for bringing your insight and your interrogation to the table here today as well. And finally, a thank you to you, the audience, for tuning in to this episode of Open to Debate. As a nonprofit working to combat extreme polarization through civil debate, our work is made possible by listeners like you, the Rosencrantz Foundation, and supporters of Open to Debate. Robert Rosencrantz is our chairman. Our CEO is Clay O'Connor. Leah Mathau is our Chief Content Officer. Elizabeth Kitzenberg is our Chief Advancement Officer. Michelle DeProsini is our Director of Marketing. This episode was produced by Jessica Glazer, Alexis Pancrazzi, and Marlette Sandoval, with editorial and research by Gabriella Mayer. Andrew Lipson and Max Fulton provided production support. And the Open to Debate team also includes Gabrielle Iannicelli, Rachel Kemp, Eric Gross, Linda Lee, Mary Regas, Tom Bunting, and Vlad Vertonen. Damon Whittemore mixed this episode. Our theme music is by Alex Clement. And I'm Naima Raza. We'll see you next time on Open to Debate.